We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, 90 Way Bossa Street, right in the financial district. It's a steamy summer night here in Providence. After the show's over, please come downtown and enjoy the finest that Rhode Island can offer you in terms of nightlife, seafood, fine dining, and just a really good time. Tonight's a special night here on the Coalition. We're going to take an event that we had done a few times last year, and we called it Libertarian Fabulous. Kind of came up with that on the fly because the people that we are going to invite on our show for the next several months are going to represent the leading edge of libertarian candidates for high office around the nation. The point is simple, to give them an hour of unlimited time, if you will, because we'll go beyond if we have to, much to the chagrin of my producer, but commercial-free, telephone call-free, interruption-free, to explain themselves, their background, their political platform, their experience as libertarians, and their experience in the libertarian movement, and of course to give them the opportunity to ask for not only your moral support and your political support, should you live in their jurisdiction, but also to ask for the financial support. Secondly, and as importantly, is the notion that we, after a tumultuous year in the run-up to the national chairs race, need to reestablish that sense of love and unity that we have and we still have as a political movement. It's important to me, and looking at races a couple of years ago, that we, in far-flung affiliates as far away as Hawaii, and in Florida, Maine, or Rhode Island, understand that we're all libertarians and we're all part of the libertarian movement. And we need to reach out and support our candidates regardless of where they are. We need to be aware of the concerns and the issues and the challenges they face. And we need to have conversations. I believe firmly, despite being a denizen, a regular habitué, if you will, of social media, ask my wife, I spend way too much time on it, that conversation is a dying art form in politics. That the simple back and forth that one can have, whether it be on the telephone or via, as we say here at the Coalition, the miracle of Skype, is something that's missing from political discourse. Because it's so much more provocative. There's a back and forth. There's nuances, there's subtleties that you miss in a chat room. I personally don't think the heavy engagement in chat rooms is really good for the movement. You miss people's subtleties. You miss their inflection, the tone of their voice. Often comments and remarks are misconstrued. So what we're going to do over the next few months is do our level best to promote solidly libertarian candidates who are running as libertarians in national races who have a gift and an opportunity. The gift, of course, is the unique talents that they bring to the political world. The challenge is for them to rise above the duopoly. And we as a movement need to stand firmly behind them. The type of commitment one makes as a candidate for high office or even as a candidate for local office is almost unparalleled. I believe it's the ultimate political act that embraces someone's real patriotism. You're a patriot whether you run for the United States Senate, as our guest is tonight, or you're a patriot if you run for town council or the school board. And there's a commitment there hard to describe unless you've actually done it yourself. You take yourself away from your family, very often sideline your business or your personal economic interests, all to prevent the duopoly from taking, as they say, all the oxygen out of the room, simultaneously to present a clear, cogent libertarian picture to your community, to your state, to your nation. So there's great pride that I invite and introduce, if you will, our first Libertarian Fabulous candidate, and he is Libertarian Fabulous. If you had the opportunity to be at the convention just a few short weeks ago, you were able to hear him speak, you met him in the hallways, you probably had a cup of coffee with him. He was everywhere and anywhere at the same time. He was focused on issues, the challenges, the realities, both of a state like New Jersey and the nation at large. I believe he's one of the most compelling political figures we have on the ballot this year across the nation. And of course, he is Murray Sabrin. Murray, welcome to the Coalition for the first time.
Well, thank you, Pat. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you and your audience and libertarians across the country. because we are on the verge of a major breakthrough here in New Jersey, and with the listeners out there today and who are going to be listening to this podcast in the next few days, I think we're going to have enormous success in November. And we'll talk about how we measure that success. But again, thank you for this great opportunity.
No, and thanks for joining us, sort of being the inaugural guest here for this year. You've got, as they say in the biz, you've got quite the backstory. Tell us a little bit about your family, how you came to the United States, and what's that meant to you in terms of not being just a libertarian, but a real liberty warrior.
Well, I was born in West Germany right after World War II, December 1946. My parents were the only ones in their family to survive the Holocaust. My father was a partisan commander in his native Poland. For the last year of the war that he was involved in, from July 1943 to July 1944, he commanded 240 people in the forest around Vilnius, Lithuania, Poland, and he put mines on railroad tracks, on roads to block the Nazi advance, and they were finally liberated in July 1944 by the Russians. And he wrote a memoir that is available on Amazon, We Dare to Live, which talks about all his exploits and with his young people, because everyone, I think, was younger than he was. He was 30 years old at the time. I think he was dealing with teenagers, 18, 19 years old, and other young people, men and women, who fought the Nazis for that full year. He was in the war for 5 years, from 1939 to 1944, so a good portion of his life as a young man, he had to fight to just survive, and he was the only one that made it out of World War II. So speeding things up, in 1949, my parents decided to come to America. His first cousin preceded him here, I think in 1946, 1947, and his great aunt raised his mother in America. His great aunt took his mother when she was 5 years old, I think around 1895 and 1898, took her to America. She grew up here, then she went back to her native Poland, got married, raised a family, and she perished during the war. So we came here in 1949. We sailed the Atlantic Ocean for 5-6 days. We landed on a hot August day in 1949, and my father was carrying me, and my mother's aunt and uncle from Paterson, New Jersey, that's the first New Jersey connection we had, met us at the dock, and she said to my mother, "You told me you had 2 boys. Why are you holding this little girl?" And if you go to our website, sabrinforsenate.com, you can see a picture of me of what I looked like in 1949 with long blonde hair, and I'm wondering where that all went in the last 69 years. So our first introduction to America was the west side of Manhattan. We lived on East 8th Street, which is now a very trendy area in the East Village. We had a 3-room apartment, railroad apartment, with a bathroom in the hallway that we shared with other families for $26 a month. And then in 1953, my younger brother was born in May of '53, and that August we moved to the Bronx to an apartment, a beautiful 4-group apartment with 2 bedrooms. We had our own bedroom for a grand total of $73 a month. And my father got a job as a sheet metal worker, making around $3 an hour, and he helped build Idlewild Airport, which is now called Kennedy Airport, in the late '50s. And so I grew up in the Bronx, played stickball on the streets of the Bronx, grew up near the NYU campus in the Bronx. And so we had a great childhood growing up there. I went to the Bronx High School of Science, one of the country's elite public high schools. And then I went to college, Hunter College in the Bronx. Then Lehman College, it was named that in 1968 after the governor and senator of New York State. Got a degree in history, geography, social studies education. I got a master's in social studies education in 1972. I went to Rutgers to get a PhD in geography with the goal of teaching geography. But I did a dissertation on inflation and how it affects local communities. And Murray Rothbard, Mr. Libertarian, was a member of my dissertation committee. I'm one of the 2 people in the world where Murray Rothbard served on a dissertation committee. I'm very proud of his help in getting my dissertation done in 1981. And I was a staff economist in your neck of the woods in Western Massachusetts at the American Institute for Economic Research, one of the country's oldest economic research organizations. Then I worked for their investment subsidiary. And then in 1985, I finally got a teaching job at a college, at Ramapo College, And I've been teaching there ever since, teaching economics and finance, but primarily finance the last 31 years. And so I developed a course, which I'm very proud of, the Financial History of the United States, where I bring in a lot of material written by our good friends Murray Rothbard, Tom DiLorenzo, Tom Woods, and other free market economists, with the traditional works of other economists, to give students a flavor of how people analyze the events of the last 200 years. In 1997, I was the Libertarian Party candidate for governor in the general election, and we had a very ambitious goal in 1997 to raise enough money to participate in the state's matching fund program, which then required me to be in 3 debates with the incumbent governor, Christie Whitman, and her Democrat challenger, Jim McGreevey. And so at that time, you needed $210,000. That was sort of the entry fee, if you will, into the debates. And we had to file that report by early September of 1997. And by mid-August, we only raised $70,000 from people I knew around the state who were interested in supporting me to make the case for free markets and limited government in the state of New Jersey. And so what happened, it looked like we weren't going to make the $210,000 threshold. And then we hired someone who wrote a letter to the Libertarian Party membership around the country. And we raised, Pat, $150,000 in 2 weeks. That put us over the $210,000 threshold. Initially, our application was rejected, but then we went to court, and then the Election Commission approved my application for matching funds on September 19th, 1997, and we made political history in the state of New Jersey by being the first third-party candidate to raise enough money to get matching funds, and I was in 3 debates with Whitman McGreevey, and even though I didn't win, there was no expectation of winning, I was polling a week before the election in double digits, and because the race was so close, people broke for the person that they wanted to win instead of the other person, and we got about 5% of the vote, 114,000 votes. Remember, I had never run for anything, nobody knew me in the state, and we got 114,000 votes in 1997. So some of the issues in that campaign was auto insurance. I said, let's deregulate the market. Mm-hmm. The Republican governor didn't deregulate the market. It was McGreevey, the Democratic candidate who became governor in 2002 after being elected in 2001, who deregulated the market. And now auto insurance is no longer a hot political issue in the state of New Jersey. Another issue was the 65 speed limit. We had a 55 speed limit throughout the state, which meant a lot of people were getting tickets on the New Jersey Turnpike, which is made for what, 70 miles an hour or more. Mm-hmm. So after the election, Whitman raised the speed limit to 65, and we probably saved the people of New Jersey a lot of money in tickets. I just want to get something out of my eye, if you don't mind.
No, and let me jump in for a second, because you've run across a variety of hot topics. First of all, your father was a World War II veteran. My father was a World War II veteran. You know, my father at the age of 95 is still alive. Clearly, World War II veterans are leaving us at a higher rate every day. We're down to a precious few. Growing up in one of the most difficult situations in the world at that time as a very young child, and then coming to the United States, both of us saw through our father's eyes a fight for freedom that is hard to compare, despite the bravery and the challenges of our current military folks. What does it mean to you as a family and to you as an individual, having had parents who saw and faced totalitarianism right in the eyes and fought so valiantly to overcome it? What does that mean to you as a liberty person?
Well, growing up, asking my parents about their experiences during the war, I had basically a front row seat of what World War II was like in Poland when they were trying to just survive, and how they were able to accomplish that. And so when I became a citizen in 1959 and raised my right hand at age 12 and a half to uphold the Constitution, the Bill of Rights means a lot to me, every single one of them, especially the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment was put there, if everyone remembers their history, so people would have the ability to fight any tyranny if a government decides to become tyrannical. And people don't realize that it was not done for hunting or anything like that.
Right.
It was done for protection against a tyrannical government. And so the founders had a very basic proposition that if a government gets out of hand, the people have a right to eliminate that government. Now, we don't need to eliminate our government through force of arms today. I'm not implying that at all. I'm saying we have processes in place, like electing me in November to go to the United States Senate to stand up for all these principles of liberty, which means the Bill of Rights, as far as I'm concerned. That is the essence of liberty in our society. If the Congress, if the presidents in the past and the Supreme Court upheld the Bill of Rights, there would have been no need for me to run this year because our rights are slipping away under both Republicans and Democrats. So the point I make to people is if my father could defeat the Nazis with his, help defeat the Nazis in Poland in the 1940s, I certainly can defeat Bob Menendez in November in an election, because Bob Menendez is no powerful force given what my father had to face in the World War II. So I'm running against an incumbent who is ethically challenged, who should be in jail given what the Senate Ethics Committee said about his behavior, and who is one of the biggest warmongers in the United States Senate, who loves sanctions against Russia and Cuba. This is not the way members of Congress should behave toward other nations. We should have peaceful relations. As George Washington reminded us in his farewell address, we should have no entangling alliances and commerce with all. That's the way you create a prosperous global world, instead of having all these conflicts. And boy, we had conflicts since I grew up, since the Vietnam War. I don't remember the Korean War because I was a real small kid at the time, but we were in America. But when I read about the Korean War, I said, why are we constantly trying to sort out people's differences around the world? It doesn't make any sense. If people have differences, let them figure it out. And look at how many men have died. Now, we saw today on the news the remains of Korean War veterans coming home. And that is one of the saddest sights to ever see, in these little coffins where the remains are of, I think, several dozen Korean vets. Right. And of course, there are Vietnam vets that are still missing in action. So again, growing up during the Vietnam era, seeing all the death and destruction that took place, I'm being opposed to the Mideast wars from day one, from the first Gulf War, Desert Storm, to the second Gulf War, which I told my congressman not to vote for the authorization in 2003. He did. And then a few years later, he wrote an op-ed in the local paper saying he was wrong. Well, I told him it was going to be a terrible situation in Iraq if the United States invaded Iraq. So I have become, I'm not a pacifist by any means. I can show you my firearms that I own. I'm not a pacifist. My father obviously was not a pacifist. And so the right of self-defense to me is the most fundamental human right. Everyone has the right to defend themselves, their family, and their property. And if we don't believe that, look at the Second Amendment and look at the UN Declaration of Rights. Article 3 says every human being on the planet has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Now, what does that mean in reality, security of person? It means you have to have the means in order to defend yourself from someone who's a criminal or a government that is trying to do you bodily harm. And there are a lot of governments around the world that have been doing bodily harm to people. So, so to me, the Bill of Rights is a non-negotiable document, if you will, that if members of Congress upheld their oaths to the Constitution and the Supreme Court upheld their oaths to the Constitution, we wouldn't be in the constitutional crisis that I think we're in, where government basically do anything it wants. So that's one of the reasons that compelled me to run this year after the leadership of the Libertarian Party invited me to consider running this year, is that our rights are being slipping away under both Republicans and Democrats. So I have an opportunity to take this message to the people of New Jersey and showing them that if we continue down this path, our rights will be undermined, our economy will not be as strong as it otherwise should be, even though the numbers came out today that Trump is very confident about will continue. But we know we live in a business cycle economy because of the Federal Reserve manipulating interest rates, creating unsustainable booms, and giving us inevitable busts. And so Trump reminds me possibly of what the famous Yale economist Irving Fisher said a week or two before the stock market crash of 1929, when he said the United States economy has entered a permanent plateau of prosperity, just before the market crashed and the U.S. economy started going downhill for the next 3-4 years. So this may be one of those moments when we look back at history and saying, maybe Donald Trump pulled the top in this economy with his effusive comments today in the Rose Garden about how great the economy is. Now, it may be great for another few quarters. Nobody knows. But the point is, there are signs that the economy is starting to get a little bit weaker, with housing prices softening and other variables that we look at, such as the yield curve. But getting back to your original point, liberty to me is the essence of why we are human beings. If we don't have liberty, we're not human. Humanness requires that we make our own choices in life, and we have to accept the consequences if we make bad choices, whatever those choices are. And we can't expect the government to help us impose our will on other people. That's what the left has been doing for decades, and they've been very successful at it, because they use very soothing terms like justice and fairness and things like that. They think they're taking the moral high ground, but what they are is, as somebody remarked years ago, they're iron fist wrapped around the velvet glove, that if you don't obey, you're going to be fined, taxed, or prison. And that's not what America's supposed to be all about. America's supposed to be where you find your own way in life, you build a family, you help your community, and you contribute to society. You don't become, for lack of a better term, engage in parasitic behavior, because that eventually will kill the host. And that is what we're seeing now in Venezuela. Venezuela is just the extreme case of socialism gone wild, where they have 1,000,000% inflation or thereabouts. And at one time, they were one of the best economies in South America. Now they're the worst economy in the world because of the hyperinflation. So we have to be vigilant here in the United States to make sure that we have policies in place that are based upon libertarian principles. Remember, libertarians have not ruled America for the last 160 years. It's been Republicans and Democrats, and they've taken the national debt from virtually zero to 21 trillion. They've taken the budget from virtually nothing back in 1860 to $4 trillion, the $1 trillion deficit. We have, according to some estimates, $200 trillion of unfunded liabilities. So they've made a fiscal mess of the country, plus they've created an income tax, which is used for social engineering and phony capitalism. And they've also have regulations that stifle entrepreneurship and innovation. So we have to downsize the federal government, cut taxes, cut spending, cut regulations, do something about the Federal Reserve's manipulation of interest rates. So the question is, how do we do that? That's the $64,000 question, because the Fed, quote, is supposedly independent, but the Congress created the Fed, so they can tell the Federal Reserve, we don't want you to manipulate interest rates. Let interest rates be determined by the marketplace, called supply and demand, and get out of the business of creating money out of thin air. We don't need to create new money to have a prosperous economy. All we need to do is have free markets and open markets around the world, and the economy will prosper.
Now, a couple of reflections on the things you've said. First off, one need only reflect that within the last 100 years of human history, not some faraway times, not some distant galaxies, but and not in some small nations, but within the developed world, as you talk about with what happened in Germany and as recently in Spain, developed nations, ostensibly democratic nations, have used violence and used coercion and used outright physical force, often fatal, against their own people while those people attempted to peacefully rebel. And that's the case in Germany and most recently in Spain. So the notion that we are somehow immune from a illicit government acting and using force against their own citizenry is, I think, naive at best. I've got to ask you, you mentioned Rothbard. I mean, you have had close both political and business and academic contact with some of the lions of the liberty movement. And the two people I'd love you to reflect on is Murray Rothbard and, of course, someone whom you just received an endorsement from, Ron Paul.
Yeah, I met Murray in 1974. I read his article in September 1971. That's how far back I go with Rothbard. And interesting, it was his op-ed in the New York Times, which I read. coming back from an Italian vacation. Someone had the New York Times from September 5th or September 6th, 1971, and the title of the article is "The President's Economic Betrayal." This was when President Nixon imposed wage price controls and removed the last vestiges of the gold standard when he delinked the gold and the dollar. And I read this article, and I never knew who Rothbard was. And it was so beautifully written. It was so clear in its analysis about what the problem was. And I was still teaching in the New York City schools, so I didn't have much of an economic education. I just took a couple of courses as an undergraduate. I'd been reading Milton Friedman's columns in Newsweek. And when I read this thing, I said, this guy is great. He's just really nailing the analysis about what's wrong with wage price controls. I had been basically a free market person by then, and switched from a Democrat to a Republican in the early 70s because I knew the Democratic Party was off the rails with the Great Society and more war. And so I didn't pursue it until I went to graduate school in 1972. And in 1974, I was developing a dissertation topic on how inflation affects local economies. And I wrote Rothbard asking him to be on my dissertation committee, and I didn't hear from him, so I figured he's too busy, whatever. He's teaching in Brooklyn Polytech. And so one day, driving home to New York City from New Brunswick, I stopped in Brooklyn to stop by to see him. And sure enough, he was there. And he was thrilled that there was somebody in the New York metropolitan region who was reading Austrian economics, and it was in economic geography. So he got me an invitation to the first Austrian economics conference in South Boylston in June of '74, where I met, who did I meet there? Oh, God, there were so many people there. I roomed with Joe Salerno. He was a graduate student at Rutgers at the time, and Joe has become one of the top Austrian economists, not only in the United States, but in the world. Israel Kerner gave presentations, Ludwig Lachman from South Africa, William Hutt from England. Let's see, who else was there? Richard Everling, David Henderson, Gerald O'Driscoll, Gary North. I mean, all the young economists from the Austrian libertarian movement were there, and it was great. Adam Armentano, who wrote on antitrust for so many decades. So I got the first-hand opportunity to meet these young economists, to hear Rothbard and others give talks about the economy, and it was just a great introduction to Austrian economics, which I then pursued in my dissertation research, and kept using Austrian insight at the Center for Libertarian Studies conferences in the 1970s, where I met Walter Block, eventually met Lou Rockwell when he formed the Mises Institute in 1982, and then I met Ron Paul, I think the next year, at a monetary conference in Washington, D.C. So I was able, at a fairly early age, to meet, at the early part of the movement, to meet some of the great individuals. I met Ralph Raico, the great classical libertarian historian, Leonard Liggio. The list goes on and on and on. I probably left out dozens of people, but I met so many people who helped me formulate my own perspective on these issues and allowed me to present them in a coherent way to audiences in the metropolitan region. And when I get invited to speak around the country, I've been able to present these ideas not as, quote, radical ideas, but part of the American experience of how America came to be and why these ideas are really the foundation of the American Republic, of decentralization, of limited government, of non-intervention. And so when you add up the whole libertarian Austrian school paradigm, if you will, what you get is a way of explaining to people that we've been off the rails now for more than 100 years, since the progressive period began in the early part of the 20th century. And what we're seeing today is are the consequences of progressivism, and most people can't connect the dots. The Federal Reserve, the income tax, all the alphabet soup agencies, the big military-industrial complex that we have that Eisenhower warned us about, and other individuals. So to me, it's pretty natural to talk about these things from a libertarian perspective, because it's just common sense. Big government doesn't work. Wherever it's tried, it's collapsed, whether it's in the Soviet Union, communist China, Southeast Asia, India, South America. All the experiments in socialism, in fascism, in communism, they've all collapsed, or they've had to reform peacefully, like they did in China. You got to give the Chinese credit. After Mao Zedong died, they started freeing up their economy, and they're hardworking, industrious people, and they built up a great economy. That doesn't mean they're perfect. By no means. They have a lot of problems because they manipulate their economies also in various parts of the world. But the point is, as I was explained in a podcast that I was on earlier today, we have incredible prosperity in America, but it's been uneven because of the Federal Reserve and all these other regulations. And why I want to go to the United States Senate is to point this out and create a grassroots movement to really get rid of the chains that we're in, whether it's the taxes that we pay, federal and state and local taxes. So I'll be an advocate for lower taxes also in the state of New Jersey, which has one of the highest tax burdens of any state in the union. So as I explained to people, which I did last night, by the way, the Republican Club invited me to speak, and I got a very positive reception from people there who I told the current Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate is no Republican. He's a Democrat. He supported Menendez 6 years ago when he ran for re-election, and he also believes in a welfare state. I mean, how many Republicans go around saying, I'm a libertarian, but I want a welfare state because the government should help people? Well, I believe people should be helped. It's called the nonprofit sector, and that's why I'm advocating universal credits or charitable contributions, which means instead of paying $1 in taxes, you pay $1 to your nonprofit, and you become more philanthropic without having to pay any more money.
Hold that thought for a second, because we've got a list of ideas that you want to explore tonight that represent really the core of your campaign. I just have to take a moment to pay the bills here with one of our sponsors, Beacon Shipping and Logistics. BeaconShippingandLogistics.com is one of the longtime sponsors of the Coalition Talk Radio. Folks, libertarians eventually tonight and through the week are going to hear this. Anywhere you are in the United States, if you're looking for professional auto shipping, yes, auto shipping, all right, then folks, BeaconShippingandLogistics.com. They happen to be based here in Rhode Island, but they're used by automobile dealers nationwide. Whether that car is you find that beautiful car online that is got eyes that you want to buy from someone in Milwaukee, or maybe your daughter's going to college in San Francisco and you've got to send the family beater out with her. BeaconShippingandLogistics.com, 855-3SHIP-IT. Folks, companies that are willing to take a chance to support independent media, which can often tackle controversial or third-rail subjects, deserve your support, because they're willing to do something that most companies won't do, which is kind of tiptoe into those deadly waters where people have opinions and thoughts and reactions, and sometimes voices are raised and sometimes controversy occurs. But Beacon Shipping Logistics, Air Sciences, and Yacht Club Sutter are three companies committed to the free exchange of ideas, commerce, and people. Joining us is Murray Sabrin. He is the Libertarian Party candidate for the United States Senate for a seat currently held by, my words, not my guess because he's too polite, but the despicable Bob Menendez, who, as our guest pointed out, and I'll be a little bit more overt, really became within a hairbreadth of being tossed out of the United States Senate as an active senator, as he should have been. The beauty of a libertarian campaign is that candidates, and by the way, we haven't talked about Ron Paul yet. Don't let me forget that. Before the night's over, I want you to talk about Ron Paul. But the beauty of a libertarian campaign, whether you see it locally here in Rhode Island, around the nation, is that you can ask a libertarian candidate a question. It can be challenging. It can be a third-rail subject. But we always have an answer because we have a philosophy. We're not just a bunch of politicians, as we like to say, seeking the highest office possible so we can leave everyone alone, but we also are a movement and a belief system. So you've got a number of just really fascinating ideas and things that you want to challenge, and first and foremost was your universal charitable credit. So tell us all about that.
Well, the idea came from an article that Peter Drucker wrote in the Wall Street Journal in 1991, where the title of it is, "It Profits Us to Strengthen Nonprofits." Remember, he's a management consultant. He was a management consultant. He was a social analyst. But yet, when you read it, it is basically a libertarian critique of the welfare state, and he says the bureaucracy of the welfare state does not want to solve problems. They just want to keep the status quo. And he says it's the nonprofits that solve problems by helping people achieve whatever the mission is of the nonprofit. And he says right in the second paragraph of the article, government has proved incompetent at solving social problems. That sounds like any libertarian would say that. And he concluded what we need to do is have non-profitization and replace the welfare state with nonprofits around the country. And so he had a modest tax proposal, a $1.10 tax deduction for every dollar you donate. And so I'm saying, let's accelerate the phasing out of the welfare state by giving people a $1 tax credit for every dollar they donate to their nonprofit, whether it's Habitat for Humanity or any other nonprofit that does great work in their community. And that you have to go to Charity Navigator or GuideStar online and find out which are the best nonprofits. Now, most people already work with nonprofits, and therefore they know which ones are doing great work in the community, that are cost effective, that have low overhead, that have low administrative costs, that have low fundraising costs, that maybe use 85, 90% or more of their contributions for good works. And that's the way America was before the Great Depression. They were called mutual aid societies, where people connected by some sort of bond solved problems in the local community, and no one went to Washington for programs except the big government types in the late 19th and early 20th century. So I want to return to a time in America where people to people solve problems, as opposed to this, what I call trickle-down welfareism, which has created the biggest social welfare system in the world that's accelerating in cost, and it's going to overwhelm the American people's ability to pay for it. And that's the problem we're facing over the next 20 to 30 years. The politicians don't want to talk about it because they've got their heads buried in the sand, because, as Ross Perot famously said, let us bribe you with your own money in 1992 when he ran for president. So I'm saying, let's get off of this treadmill known as the welfare state. Let's return the money to people with the tax credit so they can help people become financially independent. And that's what should be the goal of our collective society, is help people become financially independent so they can lead productive lives in their community rather than relying on their neighbors through the government to help them. And so this is a message that's resonating across the political spectrum, because what organization doesn't want to see more money coming into them that doesn't cost their members any more money? What we're doing is saying, let's take our tax dollars and help the nonprofits become better and more efficient in their mission. And I think everyone agrees with that. That's the best way to help people in our community.
Now, you've got, again, a number of issues that you want to tackle. One of them is you want to stop domestic spying.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Well, I think it's clear that the NSA is all over the place in violation of our Fourth Amendment rights. I think Judge Napolitano on Fox News has been blowing the whistle on this for years, and others who have been saying, Glenn Greenwald, I think that has been talking about this, and other people who are hardcore civil libertarians. And so we need to just get rid of the NSA spying on the American people. If they think there are threats out there, which I don't know why there would be, why would anyone in a country want to invade us, since people don't realize war is very expensive. Not only that, it disrupts your own economy, and people get really mad when they see the bodies coming home for a mission they don't understand why they're invading another country. That's what happened to the Soviet Union when they invaded Afghanistan. And by the way, that was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union when they invaded Afghanistan, because 12 years later the Soviet Union collapsed after the '79 invasion. So we got to really rein in the NSA and stop this data collecting on the American people. So that's one of the reasons I want to go. I'm going to be very strong on civil liberties in the United States Senate, to really ask the tough questions of any administration that wants to use extra constitutional methods to gather data on the American people.
Now, I want to take a break, too, because we're going to do some shameless promotion and a shameless plug for your fundraising. Explain, if you will, and this is a fascinating point. I had Mr. Rohrman on my show last year, who ran for the governorship of the state of New Jersey. And you alluded to this earlier when you talked about your magnificent performance in running against Christy Todd Whitman and Mr. McGreevey. Talk about the structure, the rather fascinating structure of New Jersey politics, and you effectively need to prove that you can basically pay to play. What will you talk about that?
Well, in '97 there was an entry fee, the 210,000 threshold to get matching.
No, wait. Let me stop there for a second. An entry fee for the quote-unquote privilege of running for high political office. In the name of God and all that is holy, How did we get to a point where there is a quote-unquote entry fee to run for political office?
Well, not to run, but to be in the debates. That was
Right.
the goal back in '97, to be in the debates.
Exactly.
That was the goal that we set out when I got the nomination. And so we achieved that goal. This year, I said to the LP leadership, the goal is to be competitive so I can get into the debates. So how do you become competitive when there's no entry fee to get into the debates? And I said, we have to raise enough money. The media will say it's a three-way race. Now, what is that threshold? I don't know what it is. All I'm saying is, last month was the 59th anniversary of becoming a U.S. citizen. So for the past 30 days, we've had this ongoing appeal to people in New Jersey and around the country. And now we're making it to the whole country. Send us $59 or a multiple thereof at sabrinforsenate.com. If we raise several $100,000 by the end of August, I can guarantee you the media will say it's a three-way race, because remember, we do not have a paid staff. We do not have any paid high-priced consultants. We do not have any headquarters around the state. It's a virtual campaign. So if we can get 10,000 people in New Jersey and around the country to donate $59 on average, that's $590,000. I can tell you the media will be beside themselves and say, Sabrin's got something going with the grassroots, that he will be able to challenge Menendez and be toe-to-toe with Yugen in the debates, and the pollsters will take notice that there's a third challenger, or say a second challenger to Menendez, and therefore he has to be in the debates because he has a message that's resonating with the people of New Jersey. So I need all libertarians in 2018, like they stepped up to the plate for me in 1997, to send us $59. That's all it takes, $59. Send something now and send something at the end of August, or send the full $59 now at sabrinforsenate.com. And I guarantee we will be in the debates. It's that simple. And in the debates with Menendez and Yugen, I will make the case that Bob Menendez does not deserve to be in the Senate because of his pro-war position, which, by the way, most Democrats don't know. I've spoken to Democrats who have no idea about his pro-war record. And Bob Yugen is the former CEO of Celgene that has already put $15 million of his own money into this campaign. If he's so desperate for a job, he should put his resume online instead of spending $15 million to try to get a seat in the United States Senate that only pays about $171,000 a year. So I've got Bob Yugen in a position where if he touts himself as being a great public servant. So with $15 million, Pat, he can do what I helped to create in Bergen County, a nonprofit health center 15 years ago, which is now celebrating its 10th anniversary. Bob Yugen can take the burden of New Jersey taxpayers because we can take people off of Medicaid and get them into the nonprofit health centers. So that would be a great blessing, not only to the people who are on Medicaid, who have a hard time getting a physician, but a great help to the people of New Jersey that are paying a fortune in state taxes to support the Medicaid system, because we know Medicaid is a joint program between the feds and the states. So Bob Yugen, if you're listening out there, do the right thing, get rid of that $15 million, or if you have another $15 million, take that money and open up nonprofit health centers and be the leader in helping the people of New Jersey who need medical care and relieve the tax burden on the people. So I'm saying, and I've said this publicly, I've said this privately to Republicans, Bob Yugen is not ready to be a United States Senator because he doesn't have any core belief that are anywhere near conservative or libertarian. And I use conservative very in a way that represents the old right in America, the people of the 1930s who were critics of the New Deal and who were critics of interventionism. Those were the original libertarians in American politics. The H.L. Menckens, the John Flynns, the Garrett Garretts, the Henry Hazlitts. These were the people who saw the coming of what they called economic fascism. That's what they said. Economic fascism is coming to America if we follow the FDR model. Remember, the New Deal was modeled after Mussolini's program in Italy. So they were right on target, and this is what we're living in the United States today, an economy that is run top-down by Washington. But here's the beautiful point of our economy, Pat, and I think libertarians should appreciate this. Given everything that's thrown at the free market, the economy is still producing goods and services that we want. I'm amazed at all the goods and services that are at the mall, all the goods that are available in the department stores, in the big box stores, in the food stores. It's amazing what's available. We have automobiles, all types that are available. We have clothing that's available. This is the power of the free market. And what I'm going to offer the American people is, if you want to see a stronger economy, then we have to get rid of all the regulations that hamper businesses and hamper entrepreneurship in the country, and allow people to trade freely, not only overseas, but in the United States as well. I can't tell you, Pat, how many people I've spoken to in the last few weeks that are planning on leaving New Jersey because of the property taxes and the income taxes, because it's so difficult to keep your head afloat, especially if you're a senior citizen when your income is a lot lower than you're working. So we have a problem here in the Northeast. Government keeps on spending and spending and spending. We have a governor who you think went to the Karl Marx School of Economics because he's out of Wall Street, and yet he's speaking like some left-winger that went to Berkeley in the 1960s. And it's really sad that somebody who thinks that government spending is the answer to people's problems shows you how deeply embedded the notion of each according to his ability to each according to his need, which is what Karl Marx said. I'm turning that on its head and saying from each according to his ability voluntarily to each according to his need temporarily. We want to help people stand on their own 2 feet. And that's what America means to me, is that you go to school, you learn, you develop skills, and you have a productive life. There are 2 things my parents taught me, and basically that was it. Learn and save money. That's what they taught me when I was a youngster, growing up in New York City. And I didn't stop learning until I got my PhD, and I've been saving a lot of money for the last 33 years since I've been working at Ramapo College. So I'm in a very good place personally, but I see all the things that are happening. And one of the things that I just learned, Pat, that is going to scare wits out of senior citizens who are on Medicare, is that Medicare premiums are on schedule to increase exponentially over the next 20 years. And I've seen projections that people on Social Security and getting Medicare, their Medicare premiums will be greater than their Social Security benefits. They will have a negative cash flow with the U.S. Treasury. That's how dysfunctional the welfare state is, that it's now being means tested for Medicare. And this is another example of our Marxist culture, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. We have to stop this cycle of progressivism. Remember, government is the only institution that punishes you for being successful. Look at this, the income tax. As you make more money, you're taxed at a higher and higher rate. Now, it's true, rates are coming down. The estate tax, literally very few people pay it now because they increased the exemption, but there's no reason to have an estate tax. It brings in very little money on a $4 trillion economy. So what we need to do is downsize the federal government, get rid of foreign aid, which is unnecessary, let companies trade freely across the globe, and we will have a much better U.S. economy, a much better global economy. So I want to go to Washington and make the case on the Senate floor. What you've been doing here is all wrong. Let's have a reset where we look at the Constitution of what we can do. Unfortunately, we're stuck with Social Security probably for the next 40 years, but I want to give young people the option of staying into Social Security or Medicare. We're supposed to be a nation of choices. Where are the choices when it comes to Social Security and Medicare? Another issue that we're going to take to the people in the fall is student debt. As you know, by law, students cannot discharge their debt through bankruptcy, their student debt, because of the federal guarantee. I believe students should have the same constitutional right to discharge their debts as billionaires, like Donald Trump did when he was in private sector, and companies. So we have what? An unfairness in our bankruptcy laws. So I want to change that so young people can get out of the debt situation that they've taken on, mostly through not fault of their own, because they're told that they have to take on a lot of debt to go to a very expensive college and get a degree, which sometimes may not be a path to a successful career.
I mean, what's fascinating to me as I listen to you expound on economics is the opportunity here, if we can get behind your campaign as a libertarian nation, if you will, is to have an Austrian economist on a debate stage with a corporate cronyist and a machine politician. I mean, folks, regardless if you're an audacious libertarian or a member, as I am, of the Mises group, that's compelling stuff. And someone who can so clearly evoke, as I like to say, a clear, cogent message of liberty and economic freedom and self-determination, to do so in one of the most difficult economies in the nation, which is New Jersey, with all the challenges they face as a failed state, which they do, which is clearly proven attempts at central planning of a state economy, or taxation, extraordinary taxation through a millionaire's tax of people who have managed to be successful despite the best efforts of the New Jersey state government. The opportunity to do that is unparalleled in our party's history, at a time when people are keenly paying attention to what's going on in these senatorial races because of this incredible stagnation in the United States Senate under the age of Trump. It's a brutally important race that the entire nation is paying attention to. And to your points about Menendez being a warmonger, I think you just shared statements just within the last 2 weeks about his continued near obsession with waging first economic war with clearly the tacit understanding that it might promote actual overt war with nations around the world.
This is so appalling to me. Here's a Cuban American who touts his heritage, yet he wants brutal sanctions against his own people in Cuba. I mean, that is so shocking to me that it's disgraceful that he can get up there and say we should have brutal sanctions against the Cuban people, thinking that that's going to change the regime. No, the way you change regimes is you engage them, as Trump has done with North Korea. I applaud him for denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. I went on record as saying, let's denuclearize the whole world, because we have, what, 20,000 or more nuclear weapons around the world. It only takes a few of them to create havoc in the global landscape and the deaths of millions of people. So if no nukes is good for Korea, no nuke should be good for the rest of the world. That's the logic of that argument. So I want to go to the United States Senate and say, listen, we've had these nukes, we've only used them twice, and we're the only nation to have used them, and they were against what? Civilian populations in violation of international law. So let's get rid of them once and for all. What happened to the peace dividend when the Soviet Union collapsed? I want to know where the peace dividend is. Right. Where has it gone? We have roads in this country that look like third world roads. I was in Cuba, the roads are horrible. I was in other third world countries, the roads are horrible. We have roads in New Jersey that are comparable to that. If the government can't do the roads, how are they going to do health care?
My roads.
Education. So this
they can't.
The conundrum that we face ourselves. People think that people in Washington and Trenton and Providence have their best interests at heart. No, they don't. They're self-indulgent individuals who are using government for power, for narcissistic purposes, for feathering their own nest, like Menendez has done with his buddy, Dr. Melgen, who's now serving a jail sentence for defrauding the American people through Medicare to the tune of $100 million. This is the type of guy he is, and we need to get rid of him, and I'm the person to defeat him in November, because the Republican is a Democrat light. He supported Menendez in 2012. He's a Hillary Clinton Republican. He doesn't offer anything in the way of fiscal conservatism, of a sound monetary policy, or a non-interventionist foreign policy. So if the people out there want to see someone stand toe-to-toe with the Lindsey Grahams of the world, with all the neocons in the United States Senate, and work with people in the Senate like Rand Paul and others, like Mike Lee, and build coalitions like Ron Paul did in the House, to really take this country back on its track of limited government and a non-interventionist foreign policy, the 21st century will be a remarkable century. But we need to get behind candidates all over the country. If you can help us out at $59, this is our initiative till the end of this month. And then next week is my wife's 39th birthday, again, as I like to kid her. And if you can't do 59, do 39, because she said, don't send me any gifts, Murray, this year. Let the people around the country who helped you in 1997 help you again by sending $39 or maybe more in honor of her birthday next week. So you have a choice of 59 and 39. And the following week, Pat, is the 69th anniversary of coming to America. So we have three possibilities: 59, 39, and 69, and it gets better, as they say in the commercials. At the end of August is my wife and I are celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary. So you can send $50 for that. So you have four possibilities: 59, 39, 69, and $50. Or you can do all four of them, which would be great. Or you can spread it out over the next 2 to 3 months. But I can tell you, raising money by the end of August, the media will have a field day with our campaign saying it's a three-way race, and we better pay attention, because look what happened in New York City, where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came out of nowhere to defeat a 10-term congressman who is possibly going to be the next speaker of, if the Democrats took over the House, next speaker. She was down 35 points in the polls and won by 15 points. This is extraordinary of what you can accomplish. Bernie Sanders ran as an independent in the Democratic primary and raised over $200 million for democratic socialism. There's got to be 10,000 libertarians around the country that would like to see libertarianism promoted in the United States Senate instead of democratic socialism. Donald Trump essentially ran an independent campaign within the Republican Party, and he blew through the primary and won the presidency against all odds. So the point is, the impossible is always possible, and it's been proven the last few years in races around the country.
There are political insurgencies abound, and if I'm correct, I believe approximately 4.5 million Americans took the time to vote for Gary Johnson for the presidency of the United States. If we as libertarians can harness a fraction of that energy, just even 10% of those folks, to actively give to serious libertarian candidates around the nation, rock stars like Murray Sabrin, who have spent a lifetime dedicated to economic liberty and now liberty beyond borders, to the party, and get them onto the national stage, then we have a real opportunity here to grow as a movement, grow as a philosophy, and actually elect people to office who believe in the libertarian movement. No apologies, no equivocations, no qualifications in terms of beliefs. Simple, straightforward economic liberty and justice for all. And it's within our grasp. We have the opportunity to do this. 2016 saw a record turnout for libertarians. It's our opportunity. If you're a member of a libertarian affiliate, this election is sacred. We take whatever gains we made in 2016. We need not simply to maintain the status quo, we need to build on them. And we build on them by reaching out to libertarian candidates around the nation, and in particular, poster children for the libertarian movement like Murray Sabrin. You know, it's a little bit from all of us to a bunch of people, and we can change our world. There's no reason, as Dr. Sabrin points out, that we can't have the same kind of wins that outright socialists who are advocating in their own kind of interesting way, shall we say undereducated way, for a failed platform, when the fabric of this country was built on free market economics and rugged individualism. That's what we need to promote. We need to promote that libertarians protect the rights of the ultimate minority, the right of the individual, that libertarians provide a path, a methodology, a concrete approach for rising the prospects, the lives, and the outlook for all Americans, regardless of their background economically, educationally. That, in fact, we need to look around us within as closely as Latin America to understand that planned economies are planned failures. So give us your websites again and give us the lowdown on how folks can support you and where you're going to be appearing. And I'm asking all my friends in the libertarian indie media, of which we are legion, to collectively get together and take time like this to promote Dr. Sabrin's cause so that we, as individual small outlets, can be mighty in our roar, that we come together and see a common purpose in rising up. Yes, I'm intentionally using their mantras, their cliches, their words, all right, to rise up and provide the libertarian moment we've all dreamed about. Where can we find you again?
Pat, at sabrinforsenate.com, you hit the donate button on the top. If we can get 10,000 libertarians around the country, which is not a lot, given how many votes libertarians got in the last cycle, 10,000 libertarians in New Jersey and around the country at $59 a person, we're talking about 590,000. That would provide us with the funds to really get our message out, to reach every voter in the state, 5.8 million. And if we get 1 million votes in November, we win this election easily. Easily. And that's what it's going to take. 500,000 now, another 500,000 or 600,000 in August, and another 700,000 in September. And we will dominate the media in October. And every voter in the state will know peace, liberty, and prosperity, our motto, will make life better for them, not only here, but around the country. And we will finally have the type of America that the founders envisioned, that the old right envisioned for America, getting rid of trickle-down economics, having peaceful and strong economic relations around the world. That's what I've been working for 50 years. And since I got involved with the libertarian movement, about 45 years, since 1973. And I'm happy to say my first libertarian campaign that I donated to, in 1974, Pat, when I was a graduate student, not working, I donated $100 in 1974. That's comparable to $800 today in purchasing power. So I'm not just asking for $59 or more, if you can, from 10,000 libertarians. If we could do this in the next week, Pat, the media will write the narrative. This is a three-way race, and Murray will be in the debates, no question about it. And I will go toe-to-toe with Hugo and Menendez and show that the libertarian platform is what New Jersey and America needs.
Absolutely. You know, there's a tendency out in the social media to talk about what's going to happen in 2020 or years in the future. We have opportunities right now to change the world. We shouldn't be thinking about 2020. We need to be thinking about November of 2018. Get us a United States senator who believes in a libertarian message, and we'll change the world. It's really that simple, isn't it?
Well, this is what I've been saying to people around the state, that all it takes is one breakthrough. The first libertarian U.S. senator means that it's a game changer for the country. And I happen to be, fortunately, possibly the one that could be in that position. I didn't ask for this position. I never had a desire to be a political candidate. I was invited twice by the Libertarian Party to run for office. We had a successful run in '97 just to get into debates. That was the goal. Now, the goal is to be competitive, and given the weakness of the two candidates, Menendez has a 29% approval rating, Pat. That means it's possible in a three-way race, he will be coming in third. Think about that. An incumbent senator coming in third, I winning and beating Hugen, who's going to spend maybe $20 million or more of his own money. We don't need anywhere near that. If we could raise at least $1 million, Pat, over the next 2-3 months, I believe we will win relatively easily, because everyone will hear the message of peace, liberty, prosperity, protect the First Amendment, protect the Second Amendment, protect the Fourth and Fifth, the Ninth and Tenth, and start to decentralize the federal government so the people and states will have the ability to make decisions that have been overtaken now by the federal government.
Folks, he's libertarian fabulous, as we say. If you didn't listen tonight, we'll be putting this, or didn't catch all of it tonight, we'll be putting this out on social media in the next day or two. Folks, the website is Sabrin for Senate, S-A-B-R-I-N, for Senate.com. You can learn about his background, his backstory, his family's heroic trip to the United States. You can learn about him as an individual, his economics background. We didn't have time for the Ron Paul story. We're going to have you in again in the next month or so just to kind of update us, let us know how the campaign is going. But he is truly libertarian fabulous. Of course, I'm talking about Murray Sabrin. He's running for the United States Senate from the great state of New Jersey. Folks, he deserves your support. He's earned it. This is a moment we've dreamed about as libertarians. Let's not miss it. Murray, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Pat. This has been great, and thank you for all you're doing for the movement.
All right. God bless. Folks, again, we're going to hold him to this. We want him back to give us a good Ron Paul story. That'll be the tease for his next visit here. The Murray Rothbard moment alone was worth the price of admission. But we're going to say goodnight on this note. Whether you're libertarian fabulous or in the part of our first guest, you're simply an activist looking to advance the notion, if you will, in our country that gun rights are a natural born right, the right to self-defense for every American, not only members as he is of the LGBT community. You clearly are someone who, as we like to say on this show, hashtag takes it personally. In both cases, these folks' lives are testament to taking it very, very personally. Join us next week for our next installment of Libertarian Fabulous, but I'd like to say goodnight. Folks, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and the mothership, our home website at coalitionradio.us. Thank you for listening. Please support our sponsors. And Dr. Sabrin, just a heartfelt best of luck, and we're going to do whatever we can here in Rhode Island to support you.
Thank you so much, Pat. Take care now. Have a good